Before we kick off, just some... two more this time. For real, before we kick off, some housekeeping acknowledgements. We are gathered here on Bunurong and Wairarong land. Sovereignty was never ceded. I'd like to pay my acknowledgement. I'd like to pay respects to elders past and present. And even though I don't have an elder to ask formal permission to enter the land on, I humbly give this talk upon their lands. And for the white fellas in the room, remember to pay your rent this month. Ooh. That's not the button I'm looking for. That's the button I'm looking for. Okay. What's up? My name is Samara-Jade Karina Sendek. I'd like to point out that even though that Jade has a lot of tattoos, that's an imposter. I'm not blonde anymore. I am a writer, narrative designer, QA wench, based out of so-called Collingwood. I specialize in working with large and established IP. My credits include Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, Victoria 3, all the rest of those things up there as well. I'm also a Gunai and Palawa woman. I'm also an ex-MMA fighter. I'm learning how to be a DJ, and there's a lot of other really, really funky stuff going on. So, kicking off, here's a wild thought. Games are a storytelling medium. We can transcend the bounds of liminal space and thought. Imagine if you could just educate someone with the flick of the wrist and stroking the keyboard. By understanding these frameworks and models, we can begin the arduous process of dismantling these inherent biases and appropriately critique what comes next. Have I paid enough lip to the thought leader theorist yet? Are all the auteurs in the room jazzed up? Lofty goals and loftier promises. But before we get to dazzling people with words better fit for a sermon, we're diving into the mud and blood. Learn practical skills rather than tangled theories. While the above is something we should drive to as artists, it's like saying, step 1, begin with spheres and ellipses, step 2, draw the rest of the horse. It's not helped by people thinking that because programming is easy, that everyone should have to do it. Same as every artist should learn gouache painting before photography, or every great muso begins with a glockenspiel before the drums. When you need to learn a discipline, you need to learn the skills. And the skill we're working with today is Subtext, otherwise known as the coward's tool. Now, for fans of my habitual pithy quote, here is a pithy quote. If you know why someone is doing what they're doing, why they're behaving the way they are, then that's your job to reveal that, and often that's situational. Wisdom from Galadriel herself. Of course, she's talking about acting, but if you're anything like me and think that the Venn diagram between acting and gameplay are a complete circle, this is pertinent. Especially with consumer service focused design, the player is basically the starring actor in your cinematic blockbuster game. You're writing the script, you're designing the sets and making the costumes. The player is just doing the acting. So for a quick definition, subtext is defined as an underlying and distinct theme in writing or conversation. Let's say, for example, Huey and Dewey were talking about how great life is over the grave of their brother Louie. It's a dreary day with storm clouds overhead, and the two brothers are talking about going to the water park after robbing Uncle Scrooge. In literary terms, we're using juxtaposition, set dressing, and character relationships. Overtly, they're talking about how they're going to live their life over their brother's grave. But, holy moly, you were not supposed to see any of that. Yet, anyway. The subtext is simple. This is how the brothers are processing their grief. The author is making a statement on the trite, life is short, and how that's often used to disguise how sad and self-destructive they really feel. Over time, that message can change to unprocessed grief leads to more trouble, or death changes who we are, and we must let it, or harm those around us. Now, mechanics do much the same, but in a game context. So rather than just looking at words non-stop on a blank bit of canvas, or looking at whatever's happening on a screen passively, the subtext is by doing. Missile Command, with only 2 paragraphs of text at most, delivers a succinct take about nuclear war. Yet people comically miss the point with Call of Duty. So on a gameplay level, Missile Command is only defensive. You must defend your cities with an ever-depleting stockpile of defensive missiles. But the bombs and the ICBMs just keep coming. Once you've lost every city and bunker, the only words you see are the end, not game over. But going back to the last point on subtext, the mechanics and the text both say, nobody wins in nuclear war. It's just a hopeless last stand against mindless, endless destruction. It remains to this day one of the most effective anti-war games we have. And that's a talk in and of itself, but between this war of mine and Missile Command, we need more anti-war games. Someone please help me in this endeavor. Now, Call of Duty does have its light bulb moments, this one also involving a nuclear weapon. The last American mission in the original Modern Warfare, Shock and Awe. You and your fellow Marines go looking for a downed helicopter pilot. You've been warned about a confirmed nuclear weapon. This has been building up over the course of the game. But the Marines agree that nobody gets left behind. And just as it looks like you've got the pilot shot your way through an on-rails set piece and are aboard the helicopter to freedom, boom. Heroism in a war zone gets you killed. There is no glorious escape, no America saves the day, just 100,000 people dead born to kingdom come. In Black Ops 2, however, the closest you get to self-awareness is chasing down a gang of villains in a playground of the rich, ostensibly to defend the rich. The rest of the game is uncritically chasing down an enemy of the state that the US war machine created in the first place. And the series just goes downhill from there. From machismo displays of blindly following orders to shoving guns in people's faces to de-escalate a confrontation. And when your only response to that is, if you do not comport yourself in a manner befitting a soldier, the game will fail you. Every writer, war veteran, and playwright in the room knows you're taking the piss. Okay, but what about the other direction? Ludonarrative dissonance, as the scholars call it. Autorialship helmed by lunatics, I call it. And I mean it as written, auteurs being both directors and writers, and lunacy being a monthly madness involving a full moon. If the metaphor a broken clock is right twice a day were a person and given $500 million to make whatever they wanted, that person would be Zack Snyder. Now, I'm neutral on checked and balanced auteurs. You only need to look at the Barbie movie to see teamwork and style in action. It's the unchecked ones that give me pause. Now, Snyder himself, he's a fantastic photographer, and you instantly know if he's touched something. Snyder himself, but his writing chops are spoiled and long since turned gangrenous. all throughout his run on DC, you could tell he was just itching to write an Injustice timeline. And for those playing at home, that's when Superman goes a bit batshit. But enough about the rich end of town. Games are not movies. We have autorial lunacy at home. Quantic Dream's a great start. Yeah, some people instantly know. It's a game about emancipation and choice. Detroit Become Human promises. As you're led through a series of tunnels and mandatory inputs to exact David Cage's cinematic ambitions. Nope. On point. Thinking beings crave freedom, it wants to say, but cannot fathom what it needs to seal the point. All of it couched in a beat-for-beat repeat of the American Civil Rights Movement, whitewashed by fair-skinned androids. Ignoring outside context, ignoring the sum of its parts, and ignoring the lineage of games who tackle themes of agency, like Bioshock, New Vegas, Oddworld, Stanley Parable, and The Path. That was also a spoiler. I am very sorry, this is a little bit sensitive. It was to its detriment. One poignant bit of criticism was, I'm sure I'd be impressed if I'd never seen a film before. But this is the point. Make your game's actors and scripts line up. This is where your design department and narrative department need to bridge. Narrative handles the big script and the casting. Design handles the stage production. Does it need to be haute art? No. It can be as trashy as you like. Just keep in mind, just quietly, Doom's elevator pitch is Space Marine too angry to die carries out a one-man war against the Christian afterlife. Remember, every mechanic, level, sound, and art asset is in service to that. Just so, in Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy, it's a game about perseverance and the thought processes of conquering a game's challenge. The assets of 100 game-like objects and the mundane and repetitive mechanics, and even Foddy's voiceover reference this. But above all, the mechanics and the prose lines up. It makes sense. Now, you could certainly argue that both Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy and the Doom franchise have had auteurs across its respective lifetimes. Successfully, even. But again, I stress the difference between people who know their strengths and know their team, and basically being a cigar-chomping cordial. So, let's begin with your strengths. What's your discipline? Start with the ones you've invested the most time in. That's what you consider. If you're a digital artist, begin with the assets. What kind of artist are you? Do you use line, color, shape, form, texturing, silhouetting in a certain manner? Are you a self-taught illustrator squirreling away hours in the night behind your parents' back? That all changes your tone. What about design? Are you a systems designer plucking at ways to make the mechanics work? That'll influence what kind of narrative you can tell. Or are you a narrative designer like myself? You might consider mechanics that can reinforce what story you're telling. A writer might start with tones and moods, but not know how to express them in mechanics. But the important bit is, you start. It doesn't matter if you're a programmer with a quad movement system built for a cephalopod. Just look at Octodad. You might buddy up with an artist who does eldritch horror and a writer who lives for trope subversion. And that might end up about a game about Cthulhu's completely innocent Tea Party and Relia, but you cause mayhem and mass hysteria across the globe while you get there. And then you've got a game about how innocent activities that seem hostile and incomprehensible to an anxious pet. You're just having tea, but all the little ants on the ground, they're all losing their minds. Help! But all we're doing is just having tea. But still, that's step 1, draw a circle. Step 2, draw the rest of the horse, but now you've got an idea. I wish I could demonstrate this whole process, but there's roughly about 20 minutes left, so let's design a small game. Let's design a small game with interlocking mechanics and writing. It's ludonarrative synchronous. The script and the actors are lining up on the big thing, and it's high level only. Nitty gritty, take it away and develop it further with your own teams. Just a thought. We'll go with a narrative focus since that's my business. Looking at the domains of narrative, that would be looking at character writing, world building, lore, plot, cinematics, delivery systems, writing style, genre of story, etc., etc., etc. Anything you would love to do in a tabletop RPG, but very rarely get paid for. Personally, I like to start with genre of story and genre of play, figure out where I'm going from there. Let's say I want to make a third-person eldritch horror with comedy elements. Starting with our basic assumptions, let's just say that combat is not present in this game. The player is the lead actor, they want something to laugh at, the zeitgeist is miserable and people are struggling to survive, and eldritch horror is comes with a lot of baked-in racism. So it needs to be funny, so it can't be a Lovecraftian horror. Handedly nixes a lot of the racism part if you cut that out. It also must address people's worries about today, about not being able to fight back. Now, remember how I said you start? This is that start. You have a random smattering of mechanics, a blurry vision of what you want, and assumptions that you can change later. What you've got now are a designer's reason for being. Problems. The most powerful tools you'll have to solve them include what if and I wonder. In practice, what if the player was a blue-collar delivery driver? Okay, well that solves players relating to the avatar. What if this delivery driver was a courier between eldritch abominations? That leads to something like Crazy Taxi or Mirror's Edge, but we can work with this. I wonder if adding parkour mechanics could spice this up. Okay, we're going back a bit more to Mirror's Edge, and it's a bit high on scope, but we'll be a little bit more careful with moving forward. The player can't fight back, so how about an Amazon courier for Yog-Sothoth? Then it hits everyone what the pitch is. Help, my boss is an ancient evil and he'll suck my soul out if I fuck up this pizza delivery. Now there's a guiding principle. That pitch neatly sums up what the game is. A delivery person whose best hope is keeping their head down while still conveying the tone. The mechanics are there too. Everything you do is geared around being a courier. Synchronicity, and better still, if the team ideated it together, you have a checked auteur. Now, we can get moving. Or in other words, draw the rest of the horse. If it's lined up properly, the art department can now say, okay, we need alien vistas and impossible geometries, but what do we call a car? You could simply say a car and putter around in a Prius while surrounded by tentacles coming out of the asphalt. The subtext there would become the mundane lets you survive the weird, or you can get creative with a quap buggy and a typing minigame about where you need to input the correct commands to a walking cart. The subtext would now read as, the rules have changed, so we must change with them. Now the programmers and artists can come together and say, okay, well, now that we've solved that, what does parkour look like? Designers reply, what if we did a fleshy walking surface for parkour? What if we did metals for parkourables and liquid pits to avoid? Clear language for the devs, clear language for the player. And the subtext refers to our understanding of the world. Flesh is how we get around. The metal boxy things let us do cool things, and water is a logistician's nightmare. But then art says, liquids take too long since we don't have a tech artist. What about particles? In steps the narrative department says, yeah, that still works. Well, we can frame that as noxious biogas from the old ones, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, so on and so forth. That back and forth is good. You want departments talking to each other. They understand the subtext, they understand the conceit, they understand what's going on. Nothing's locked, but everyone's still driving towards the main pitch. Now that there's mechanical subtext, you delivering mysterious objects that turn out to be extra bacon meat lovers for Cthulhu, worrying if you'll have a job and a soul in 5 minutes. What do you do about the writing? This is why I say you have to attack genre of story and genre of play. We have an Assassin's Creed for Yogg-Sothoth's New York pizza parlor with GTA's car mechanics, and you're just a delivery fella caught in the middle of this. What now? We can look at things like the zeitgeist, whatever's happening on the world around us. We can look at the genre lineage, Mirror's Edge, Crazy Taxi, Simpsons Road Rage. What the player does in the game, look at your mechanics, look at the art, and bring all of that together and ask, how do you make that funny? Pizza Tower is a good example. The main character is an anxiety-racked chef with too much on his plate. And Peppino Spaghetti is instantly relatable. We've all been in survival mode before. Or we can make someone who's outwardly professional to the ancient horrors, but in the car on the rooftops, they're screaming about what happens if they miss tomorrow's delivery. But what if we make it more anime? What if the character's desperation to not have their soul tentacled out of them makes them more useful than the average cultist? Or their very rage at being a pawn in the Elder One's capitalist empires lead to them destroying the environment around them. Or the entire time they're worried about their cat eating the growth hormones meant for Azathoth's young brood. So now, on the surface, there is a courier who bounces between utter fear and absolute rage, trapped in a job they have no hope of escaping, but do it anyway to survive. And they cannot change the system, though they do their very best against the old one's indifference. They carve out a niche for themselves within a neat community because carve out a niche for themselves with a neat community of other struggling survivors, and because the cat will starve if they don't. Now, there's a neat game that says, on the surface, the old preside over a hellscape that ruins the young, all to feed their insatiable greed. But the subtext says, put against soul-crushing terror, people will always find a way to survive. And now we have a powerful artifact about people trying to survive a broken system sustained by the indifference of the powerful and the spines of everyday people. The neat thing is, it's just a game about a pizza delivery person trying to feed their cat. I expect a 5% finder's fee if anyone actually makes this game. But the point here is simple. Your narrative and mechanics are one and the same. You ignore them at your peril. This is why Doom 2016 is an anti-capitalist, anti-authoritarian masterpiece, while Skyrim is just 3 flavors of imperial states duking it out over who gets the cake at the end. Your mechanics color your narrative, and your narrative colors your mechanics. Art informs both, but does not supersede them. Audio enhances all of the above, but never dictates. You must understand how the rules work before you break them. Even the golden rule of get others to check your work. And the harm you can cause cannot be overstated. What may seem like a cutesy home builder where you pay rent to a raccoon is really just a pro-capitalism pitch. Where you think you've rejected modernity and embraced tradition on your late grandpa's old farm, you've really just made an extractive wealth machine with your cash crop monocultures. And when you pick up that job in that cyberpunk dystopia thinking you're battling against the man, all you're really doing is propping it up by enforcing a corporate agenda. Just as a bit of a side note here, these games are like, they have much, much, much worse subtext going on here. That's just the cream on top of the mash. And autorial lunacy is exactly how you get that happening. Consider deeply what script it is you're writing and what you are asking your actors to do, and ask why it is so. Because a lot of players don't always want to be typecast as the burly action movie hero or the pretty princess and her dollhouse. Some people really just want to star as a fisher in an eldritch sea, or just a girl unpacking her life. Because while being an angry space marine is nice every once in a while, sometimes you just want to be a honkin' menace to society. And if nothing else, just remember that this is why narrative designers exist. To make everything make sense. Thank you. Okay, no, I blitzed through this a little bit, mostly because it's only day 2 and I'm already dead on my feet, but that also means we've got a lot of time for questions. Oh, we got one. Hi. Hold on. Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
So if you're approaching making video games, say, from a background of just art or narrative in a non-interactive medium such as films or novels, what's some advice you can give about thinking about mechanics early on and how to start incorporating those mechanics into your narrative if you're not, I suppose, used to having to think about them?
Good question. So this is sort of where it's like, the best advice I can give, you might have to shop around a little bit, is get familiar with your tools. Mostly because, like take carpentry for example. It's like, sure, you want to make something cool out of wood, and you just like pick up something that's just got a few teeth along a spine of metal, and it's just yeah, it's a saw, and then you find out that that's a hacksaw that's meant to go through metal. Or, this looks like a saw, and it's a Japanese bow saw, and you're meant to use it a very specific way, and that'll end up breaking. You need to understand exactly what it is you're touching. One of the older schools of thought was a lot of the subtext. Chris Crawford, there's a lot of doing things in games, therefore we need to look at it through verbs. It's a bit of a yes, no, a bit of a kind of sort of in the right direction, but not quite. Basically, like, even with the examples I was putting up before, it's like, Doom. The reason why it's an anti-capitalist game because you're going up against a fossil fuel company. They're literally getting their fuel sources from dead people, and then Doom just smashing his way through everything. He's basically committing eco-terrorism. That's one perspective of looking at it, but that's also having a holistic understanding of Doom's place in the world. The place and the context that it is, and the context of modern society. But if you're looking at it from a secular point of view, of you're just looking at it, oh, well, the writing means this, the writing means that, and this is all the writing, it's just the writing, don't look any further into it, that's kind of how you get Detroit Become Human and Beyond Two Souls, is yeah, on paper, it would probably be a smashing read. It would be impressive if all of a cinema didn't exist beforehand. As it stands, it's kind of mid. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
So, obviously, the relationship between a creator and a piece of media and the audience's relationship to it is quite different. Mm-hmm. And we have ways of testing how an audience responds to that. But subtext is a bit more subtle. So how do you test if players are getting the right subtext that you're trying to get across?
It's basically an iceberg. I'm not saying that to try and dodge the question here. It really is an iceberg. Okay, so for Skyrim as an example, there was a huge missed opportunity that could have been a wonderful discussion between colonialism and imperialism. And there was some rationale behind it, why they were doing those, why the Imperials were coming back over into Skyrim and trying to muscle the area back under control. And then you had the native population. You had the Nords that were going no, this is a big part of our heritage. This is a big part of our culture. You can't just say this guy is not a god anymore, even though we know this is what happened. And then you had the Nazi Elves and the Thalmor were basically just saying it's no. We're just going to quietly shuffle off all the humans and then return the world to basically Stardust. There could have been a wonderful discussion in that, but instead all it got renderized down to was Empire's good, rebellions suck, Dragon's awesome, don't pay too close attention. Your garden variety player is not really going to notice that too much. If they're literate, if they're if they're competent, if they're literate, if they're media literate, yeah, they can pick up on it. A lot of the time, they're not really media literate. This is where it's in part, that's why, press X to pay respects is such a meme, is that you get the subtext of actually paying tribute to a fallen comrade, and all the emotional gravity that's with that, it just gets reduced to button press. Now let's just get to the killing. Whereas a lot of media critics were rightly calling it out. They're the ones that are detecting the rest of the iceberg, whereas a lot of players are just going yeah, I just want to get to the gameplay, man. And it's really depending on who's going to look deeper into the iceberg and who's just going to see the surface.
Okay, thank you.
How do you resolve when you want to add a mechanic and it might not necessarily be a mechanic that strengthens the subtext particularly, or at best has no kind of subtext to it, and at worst could be interpreted in a way that either contradicts or undermines the intended subtext of the rest of the game? Like, should you kind of just give up on that mechanic, or do you think there's ways to kind of work around that and detach it from the intended subtext?
Okay, so basically what you're just to understand, just to make sure I understand what you're asking is like, okay, so you have a mechanic that seems to be contradicting the other mechanics and acting away from the subtext that you're going for. Okay, cool. So I would say take a step back and look at the project overall. Because and this works both ways. Because sometimes you might think, oh, that's not really doing the thing I want it to do. Start interrogating why. Basically just sit with it and see what it's actually saying. In one sense, it's a matter of like, okay, yeah, you might actually get that outcome. It's like, okay, well, I'm getting a completely undesired outcome, throw it away. The cold read is that you're getting a false positive and it's actually foiling or contrasting and actually drawing attention to other mechanics basically by sticking out like a sore thumb. In other ways, it's like sometimes that's actually the point. Sometimes you actually want to have that little bit of contrast there to make that stand out more, and that might be something you want to slip in underneath, or something you want to slip in on the top. And sometimes it's like maybe you're just a little too tired, or maybe you're just a little too anxious about it, or maybe you're just too invested with that mechanic, and you just need to like step back and get a second pair of eyes on it, or even just step away from the night, chew on it, come back about 3 or 4 days later, and then revisit it. So it's like really like it's that whole principle of write fast, edit slow. Just like you don't need to gun it go all the time. Sometimes it's better to just like sit there, think about it, and then realize where it's going.
Okay. So I was about to see if no one's got any questions. I have one.
Oh, you've got one? You want to go first? No? Cool. So, okay. Some of the levels of subtext we've talked about are quite deep and require a high degree of literacy.
Yes.
And it's the kind of thing that we can definitely expect in art gallery, can definitely expect from like theatre and film and such. And I think, you know, if you've come from a writing background, these are the messages you want to get into interactive media, and you go, yes, I'd love to fill games with this. But often where can be dealing with an audience that is incredibly diverse, like especially if you're dealing like maybe mobile games or something as well, where it's like, oh, it's very hard to pin down what level of literacy you get to engage with. Where do you feel we should be creating as artists a level of accessibility into this world? Because we do ultimately want to invite people, well, I would like to invite people into this level of literacy.
Okay, so this is where it's like, I may not be the best person to ask this, but I'm gonna give it a red hot crack. I'm sure there'll be some academics who are better equipped to handle this. Could even just be like some folksy wisdom from someone else in the crowd. When we have that, like right at the very start where I was like, you know, just taking pot shots at a lot of the thought leaders who are just saying it's like, you know, we need to transcend all this, and it's like, it's just a lot of fluff. That's kind of what it is like right now. It's fluff. Because like there's just this, there's a lot of like, I wouldn't say reluctance to engage with deeper meaning, because like people love to feel smart. That's kind of the whole point of conspiracy theories. They want to feel smart. They want to feel like they've solved it. They've got it. They know what's going on. They really don't, but anyway. That your garden variety Homo sapiens is going to lean that way too. That's why you have a lot of YouTubers like Like MatPat is was one of the big ones from the last 10 years. Is saying it's like, it's just a theory, and it's like, okay, you sound like you're just making things up as you go along, just on like circumstantial evidence, but it's the same thing. It's the same process. They're trying to engage with it, even though they don't quite have the language for it. And to be honest, it is a bit of a fault of the games industry, because like we're still in our adolescence. We're still figuring shit out on our own. So we don't really have a holistic language. Having said that, like we are doing our best, and it is something we do need to address, especially if we want to recapture gamers from the far right. So that's something that an academic would need to piece together, or someone who's less on the theory side of it and more willing to engage, willing to taste make that sort of language and curate it and put it into and codify it properly. I'm sorry, that's a lot of big words and not a whole lot of sense, but that language needs to be codified properly, and we can't really do that because, games are still in the, the awkward 16 to 19-year-old phase. Parents just need more time. Yeah, need more time, or just, the magic bullet.
So can I ask a question as well?
I don't know, can you?
I think I can. I think I'm allowed to. Would you say like when a game has harder rules versus when a game has softer rules, there are like different methods that you can do to let your subtext bleed through? Like if like a game has like more freedom in like how it explores a theme versus like if it has a set story and all that?
Okay, so we're going back to the Soulsborne question here, I think. My take on that is that, okay, is that the authorial intent? So for Hidetaka Miyazaki, that absolutely was the point, is, especially in Dark Souls, is that the adversity is the point, is that, yes, you're going to get smashed into the dirt, but the point is you get up and you keep going. You try again, you get a little bit further each and every time. You're making like granular progress. But that's the point. If you say like Super Meat Boy, and it's like that's kind of just what you're selling it as, it's meant to be a challenge to be overcome. And it's like, okay, well, on a mechanical level, yes, there's a stylistic point there of saying this is a challenge to be overcome. Some of this can absolutely be self-imposed. For about like during my time in lockdown, I would do a lot of joke runs on Resident Evil and Doom. I would basically get the starting pistol and only use the starting pistol in Resident Evil. And if anyone who's played a Resident Evil game knows, the starting pistol kind of sucks. But that was the challenge of like, okay, just use this thing and overcome the challenges that way. And it changes the subtext of like, okay, not only are you just building an arsenal and metaphorically getting stronger that way, it's a demonstration of skill, so you're literally getting stronger. Those are just some case examples, but like I said, it goes back to authorial intent. Like the author's intentions have to be negotiated as well.
Hi. So, first off, thank you for the talk. It was very informative. My main question is this, and this is something that popped up in my mind, especially after hearing some other questions from the audience, that subtext obviously is only, as you've mentioned, accessible to audiences, in the most cases, who have a certain level of literacy and understanding with regards to media. And again, I also, as a narrative designer, would in my practice like to make this sort of subtext more accessible to other sort of audiences. And I was wondering if maybe we as narrative designers could learn a thing or two from puzzle design or designing puzzle mechanics, because they also sort of, I believe, they try to tease a solution out of an audience. And you mentioned that audiences like to feel smart. So are there any principles from that sort of design that we could carry over into our writing and our construction of subtext so that it's sort of, players are sort of teased into sort of figuring it out?
It's like, okay. I love a question like this because there's so many juicy answers. The answer I'm going to go with is learn how metaphor works, and basically learn how to reframe something. So the one I've been amusing myself with the most in over GCAP this year is breaking people's minds on how gladiatorial combat and mixed martial arts works these days. It's exhibitionist consensual non-consent kink.
That's so true.
Exactly. But that's the metaphor. It's just like that's, well, really it's the simile, it's the likeness there. But people instantly, like with the chuckles around the room, people instantly, they grabbed it. But that's also to an educated crowd who actually have the mental blueprints to do that. To do that reframing, to play with that kind of metaphor. This is also partly why I say instead of, oh, we'll cross that bridge when we get there, oh, we'll burn that bridge when we get there. It's like, you know, I just want to, I want to deal with that bridge once. I don't want to keep crossing it. So the context changes a little bit. So once you've got those, then we can get to the next, once we've dealt with it on the developer side, we can now develop it on the player's side, which is now we need to give them the blueprints to do that. Otherwise, it's like a computer is trying to run a program it hasn't installed yet. It's going like, I recognize there are files here, but what the fuck? I can't read them. It's a similar sort of process. It's like players need to have that skill set. They need to have that literacy. They need to have those blueprints to understand. And it can only really happen if the designers are equipped, well, the designers and the narrative team are equipped to provide those blueprints. How much time do we have left?
One last question, I think.
Yeah, about one last question. Up the back. Lucky last.
Hello. Oh, hello.
Hello.
Yeah, so I had the question of if you were, say, given the chance to work on something like Skyrim or, say, recontextualizing Tom Nook, how would you approach doing so? So if you already have an IP that has subtext that you don't necessarily want, how best would you change that with, I guess, whatever you need?
Okay. So my pet peeve with, let's go back far enough. Hi, Dante. Bye, Dante. With, what is it? Cyberpunk 2077 there. Or Shadowrun, or a lot of those, it's billing itself as, it's the cyberpunk aesthetic. It's like, Junior, sit down. That's not cyberpunk. Punk is you are directly attacking authoritarianism. You are directly attacking social repression. This is actually a tech noir. That would be like Blade Runner, where it's like, you're a detective, you're upholding everything, you're actually trying to solve a mystery with all these genre trappings, with all these aesthetics. If you're basically just a boots-on-the-ground gun runner who's doing all the crazy stuff you see in CP 2077, that's cyber core. For something like Tom Nook, or even Stardew Valley, you'd be looking at something like, you'd need to gut the capitalism elements in it. You're not paying rent to someone like Tom Nook. It's just like, Tom Nook would just basically be like, one of the trusted village pillars, but saying it's like, okay, well, let's figure out, let's get you a plot of land, let's get you some tools, let's get you figured out what you need to do. The food goes here, tools go here, and there's some allocated time to just do whatever the hell you want on a day, all right? Think about like your queer commune, well, the attempt at a queer commune anyway. For Stardew Valley, part of the problem there is its native if it's set in America, and I'm inferring that basically because it's using American English, it's not really dealing with the native disposition. It's not dealing with, it's it's touching a lot of other ick things with a caricature of a Roma seller who's just selling magical trinkets out of a caravan. It's a bit icky. So for Stardew Valley, you wouldn't be inheriting a plot of land from your pop. That would be more of a community garden patch, and you would be giving your stuff directly to the community. You'd be giving things directly to a plurality, not just like dump it in a box, get squillions and squillions of dollars, spend that squillions and squillions of dollars on like more machinery, and just to get squillions and squillions of more dollars. That's what I'm saying when it's an extractive wealth machine. It's just building up wealth for you until the point you can just replace Jojaman. You have become the capitalist tyrant of the area. So there would be a lot more mechanics focused around the community, not just like gift a carrot to Shane and he goes, thanks, I hate it. Relationshipometer goes up by 1 and he might give you a ring at the end of it. So there's just little things like that, basically.
Thank you.
I didn't put my socials up there, but if you see a jaded cynic anywhere, there's a 90% chance she's me.